Hey, it's Farley. Today's video is going to be on breaking camp. The first thing I want to go over is the layout of my gear around me because it is all laid out in a purposeful way. In the forefront of the screen, you can see my rain jacket there, and underneath that is my food in my odor-resistant food bag. I put my rain jacket on top. I don't know if this helps or not, but it makes me feel better making it not look like food. Food wrappers are really bright and colorful and distinguishable, so I don't know if that has an impact on whether or not animals recognize it as food, but it makes me feel a little bit better. So I have my rain jacket on top there and my shoes next to that just to keep them away from my face, and I try and have everything spread out and laid out in the same spot every night, so I don't have to go looking for things in the morning. They're always in the same spot around me. And on the other side of me, you can't see it, but my backpack is just to my left. I keep that completely empty while I sleep, except on the outside I have my tent poles and stakes if I'm cowboy camping. I keep it empty because in the morning you're just going to have to unpack it all the way anyways to get your sleeping bag to the bottom of your pack and to get everything where it needs to be. So I just unpack everything when I go to camp. That way in the morning I can just throw stuff in without wasting time emptying it. And the little plastic bag you can see behind me past my knees, that's my dry bag. And in there I just keep my clothes that I need to keep dry that I'm not wearing overnight, and my electronics bag. I also sleep in my hiking clothes usually, unless they're exceptionally wet. Even if they're a little damp, I'll go to sleep in them and they'll dry out overnight. That saves time in the morning too, and I keep things in my pockets that I have in them during the day. I don't take them out when I go to sleep. So things like my Swiss Army knife, my flashlight, my Luco tape, my bug net for my head, I just keep those all in my pockets too, so I don't have to worry about finding the small things like that in the morning. Now let's get going with the video. The first part here is definitely going to be the hardest part of this whole video, and that's just getting up and moving as soon as your alarm goes off. It's hard to have a trick for that, but really it's just about knowing that once your alarm goes off and you've woken up, there's no benefit to staying laying there anymore. You're not getting any extra rest since you're already awake, so just get up and start moving right away, and you'll be packed up and walking shortly. Some things to note right off the bat. First is that I don't actually get out of my sleeping bag right away when I go to break camp. If it's a colder day, you want to stay in your sleeping bag while you pack up, as long as you can anyways. That way you aren't tempted to put on any extra layers, which just eats up unnecessary time. So the first thing I go for is my food bag, and right now I'm just selecting out the food that I want for the day. I do this first because besides my sleeping pad as a frame in my backpack, the first thing that I put in is my food bag. Since it's the heaviest and I won't need it throughout the day, I stick it against my back at the bottom of my bag. So I want to get the day's food out of that large food bag first and set it aside so I can start packing my bag up. As I mentioned in the first video in this series, I try and eat one snack every hour. So I pull aside 16 snacks for 16 hours of hiking, and then usually I take a little bit more than that out of my food bag. I try to get a good mix of salty and chocolatey and peanut buttery flavors, so if there's any specific food I want, chances are I have something that will satisfy that craving too. After I have the day's food set aside, I take my sleeping pad out from under me, and for my setup, I fold my sleeping pad into quarters, and then I fold it a little bit more just temporarily so I can fit it in the opening of my bag. And then I lay it out flat against the back of my backpack and use that to kind of even out the surface against my back so it's nice and smooth. And that's what I do with my food bag here too. I make sure that I'm putting a smooth side of the food bag against the shoulder straps where my back will be, and I put that into my pack after my sleeping pad on top of it. And I try and push it down as far as I can, again, so the weight is seated better. The lower the weight is, the more comfortable the backpack is. So next I take out my pack liner and I take my clothes that were in it out and I stuff that into the bag as well. I try and get it as deep into the bag as I can, to the very bottom of the bag, so that way when I stuff my quilt in, I can grab a part of the quilt and stuff that into the very bottom of the pack. So I'm holding onto the plastic of my pack liner and pushing the sleeping bag all the way to the bottom of the liner, and then I push the liner itself to the bottom of the pack too, to make sure there's no air gaps in there. You want to make sure it's pushed right up against the bottom of your pack, so things don't settle weirdly while you walk. Next, I put my socks on. If it was a particularly cold day, I could have done this while my sleeping bag was still in my bivy. I could stay warmer that way, but it wasn't a cold morning, so I put my socks and shoes on after taking my sleeping bag out. And I do that because the next thing I have to do is stuff my bivy into my backpack, and that goes into my pack liner as well. And it's really small; it doesn't take up a lot of space, so I just stuff it into the crevices next to or on top of my quilt. Next up, I put my electronics bag and my clothes into my pack liner. I do that to keep them dry, obviously. I don't want any of those getting wet. If it was going to be a rainy day, I would keep my rain jacket on the outside of my pack. If there's any chance of it raining, I would do that. Same thing with my battery pack. I'd take it out of my electronics bag and keep it on the outside of my pack if I needed to charge my phone that day. And then I push the bag down against the ground just to flatten out the back so it's more comfortable when you're carrying it. Having a flat back helps a lot for comfort. So then I roll down the pack liner, squeeze the air out of it, not too hard. That if I push down too hard, then it's just going to barrel out the backpack and rounds the back again, which is what I want to avoid. Once I close my pack liner, this is where if I had my tarp pitched, I would take my tarp down, since everything that needs to stay dry is already sealed up in the pack liner. Since I was just cowboy camping, I just take my tarp and put it on top of my pack liner, and I seal my bag up now since that's everything that I need inside of it. And after this, all that's left is to put the food and my water bottle onto the outside pockets of my pack. And when I'm doing that, there's a couple things I want to keep in mind. I try and balance out the pack for weight, obviously. You don't want to be too heavily weighted on one side or the other. So I know everyone's gear is different, so you're not going to break camp exactly like this. This is how I broke camp every morning on the Pacific Crest Trail, though. And the main takeaways are to not waste any time in the morning, to get moving and start breaking camp. And when you pack your bag, focus on making it comfortable and making sure that everything you're going to need for the day is on the outside of your pack. And once I've got the food in my side pockets, that's all I need to do, so I just put my pack on and start walking down the trail.